over the course of the next few weeks, we'll be uncovering some of the country's hidden history.
Or rather, Dan Snow will. Imagine the most boring history teacher you ever had at school, whoever he or she might be. Dan is the polar opposite.
Earlier in the week, he was burrowing around in secret tunnels beneath Dover Castle. Today, he's above sea level, just in the Thames Estuary.
During the Second World War, there were many secret building projects, often in odd, hard-to-reach places. Many of these have faded into obscurity, but not all have been forgotten. Some still remain, like Red Sand Fort. They were last used as pirate radio stations in the 1960s, but originally they were built to house anti-aircraft guns during the war. Then they were connected by aerial walkways. Now, only the entrance tower has a ladder. I'm starting there. This fort was built here in the Thames Estuary. Whitstaple's about 8 miles that way. At the outbreak of World War II, London was the busiest port in the world. But in the opening few months of the war, the Nazis managed to sink over 100 merchant ships. These forts were built in the Thames Estuary to protect London's vital supply route. As a young boy, Frank Turner saw these towers being built near his home in Gravesend before they were towed out to sea. He has been fascinated with them ever since.
Here we have the top deck, where the 3.7-inch gun would have been situated.
And this is what it was really for, the whole purpose of the fort, right? This anti-aircraft gun.
That's it. And here you would have had a ready-to-use ammunition locker. Initially, shells would have been stored here, taken out, fused, fed to the gun. This is an interesting type of armour plating, inasmuch it's 2 layers of steel, and between the 2 layers is a stone encapsulated in tarmacadam. This was proof against heavy calibre bullets and shrapnel and such. This room here was used by the Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers.
The REME detachment. By the end of the war, 265 men were serving on the fort. In total, they shot down 22 aircraft and 31 doodlebugs. But that's not all they had to contend with.
They were under orders after the first 6 months when people started going a bit dually. They had to have a hobby, and people made dolls' furniture, hand painting, knitting, and the best produced article during the 6 weeks got a 10-shilling or 50p prize.
It's a good idea, it's a good way to keep morale up. I managed to track down one of the veterans who served on Red Sand Fort.
I think the scariest moment was when a minesweeper blew up. One day when I was below decks, there was one tremendous bang. So I rushed up on deck, and all that could be seen was a puddle of water a few hundred yards away.
The army finally left the fort and removed the guns in 1956. Then it stood empty until the 1960s, when it was used for a purpose utterly different from the one for which it had been built. It became the home of pirate radio station Radio 630, and I've tracked down one of the original pirates. What was it like during that period?
It was 1964, it was the Beatles, it was new rock festivals, it was subversive and it was exciting.
And now, when was the last time you were here?
1964.
So you haven't been up to one of these towers, well, since before England won the World Cup?
That's absolutely right.
Do you fancy coming up on a rope now?
I have to say, I did it an awful lot 42 years ago. Would you mind if I didn't do it today?
Fine, John. Well, we're about to go see if I can climb the other tower. We think there might be the remains of the radio studio that John was telling us about. It's a pretty long rope that I'm going to have to try and get up. I hope that metal hasn't corroded as much as it looks like it has. This is how John used to get to work. I've got a newfound respect for the DJs of the 1960s. What's about to be very rude about Sarah Cox. Same layout, isn't it? That looks like it's from the 60s and 70s. No sign of a DJ studio or anything like that. Perhaps it's floor up. Bunk bed there. Pretty cosy. It's probably where the DJ slept and built the studio in one of the other towers, or else the studio disappeared. Armour plating on the walls. Why don't you all Apparently, I'm the first person to come up here for around 40 years, and I must say it's been fascinating walking around these rooms which have witnessed not just one, but two remarkable periods in British history, and by the look of it, I'd say structurally it's pretty sound and it will be here for a few more years to come yet.
And we can join Dan now live. It strikes me, Dan, if you're a young DJ, you want to make your way, you should be forced to go and broadcast for one of those things just to check how keen you actually are.
Exactly, that separates the sheep from the goats, I'll tell you.
Now, earlier this week, you were at Dover Castle. You were underneath Dover Castle in these tunnels, which was fascinating, but you're also aware that apart from the tunnels you were actually walking through, there's a whole other set of tunnels which, somewhat carelessly, have been lost. Nobody knows where they are. Now, you broadcast an appeal for help, and God bless our viewers, they've actually come to the wicket, haven't they?
Adrian, it's really exciting, actually. We've had a lot of emails, a lot of people getting in touch with us. We've had one gentleman called Arthur Emmett, who's 85 years old. He was actually a sapper during the war, basically an engineer, and he was set to work digging practice tunnels under Dover Castle. His son emailed us, and he thinks the tunnel I was in might have been one of his practice tunnels. Well, that's very useful of him to tell us that. In fact, there's graffiti in the tunnel I was in, of course, dating back to 1805. So perhaps that was actually a practice tunnel dug generations before. So training for sappers probably hasn't changed that much. But we've also had a wonderful email from a woman called Mary Clark, who served down underneath the tunnels, in the tunnels, during the Second War, 1943 to 45. And she gave us a wonderful description of what it was like to stay down there under threat of shelling from northern France, staying down there for as much as 36 hours at a time. And I urge any other viewers, get in touch, don't let those stories slip away.
And where are you off to next?
Well, actually, I'm very lucky. On Monday, I'm going to be in Loch Tay in Scotland, which is absolutely beautiful. And there we found evidence of some of the earliest human habitation anywhere in the UK. Iron Age structures built on stilts in the loch. And I've scuba dived on one of these collapsed structures, and I've also seen a reconstruction that some archaeologists have built.
OK, you like stilts, don't you, Dan? I'm picking up on this. Things on stilts are good by you.
Anything on stilts is good for me. I actually use stilts. I'm about 5'2".
Thanks, Dan. And just to remind you, if you want to see the texts and emails coming in during the show, then just hit the red button